Hello everyone, this will be a quick episode where we make sure that there can only be one unit per tile. And let's see what we already have. Okay, so the current problem we have is this. If I take my rogue, I can move the rogue on the same position that's already occupied by the knight. And I don't want that to happen, because now I can't even really select the rogue anymore, because I assume that there's only one unit per tile. So we're going to fix that in this episode. But first I want to do one quick change. Our entities initializer defaults the range to 3, which is sort of an arbitrary number. The max height difference is set to the maximum, basically meaning that any height difference can be traversed. I think it would make more sense if the range would be maximum as a basis as well. And this means that we need to change this in some other places as well, because the view model assumes, the content view assumes that there's a range of 3 for the knights, and we now need to set that value explicitly. Also, if we try and run our tests, we have 2 tests that fail because they assume that the range is 3. We now need to pass that data in explicitly. So let's do that and we run our tests. And now these tests passes. So that was a quick change. Let's go and make sure that we can only have one unit per tile. And for that, let's create a new test. So let's go to our action tests all the way down and create a new one that says test move action reachable tiles does not contain occupied tiles. So this way the reachable tiles will not return any tile that's already occupied, and that way we can also not select it. So I think that's a good start. So we need an entity. That's our example entity. It can be at the 0 position. We will have another entity. This will be our obstacle. And this one will be at 1, 1, 1. Then we can get the reachable tiles. In our example map for our entity, and then we assert that reachable tiles does not contain the other entity's position. And let's run the test. And of course the test fails because we're never taking other entities or obstacles into account. So let's start that now. And to do so, we need to add some information to our action protocol. We need to pass in both in our, well, let's start with the reachable tiles function first. Let's pass in an all entities array. And this one will return, this one will allow us to pass in entities or other obstacles. This also means that we need to make sure that we use it in our default implementation. And we have a choice here on whether to provide a default value. I think it makes sense to provide an empty array as a default value, meaning we don't look at obstacles. Obstacles are not relevant for all actions, and also that doesn't change our current API, at least not for other actions. So let's see where this brings us. So now we can have reachable tiles at least passed in. However, our move action function doesn't use them yet, so we need to use them here as well. And again, we can default to an empty array, and then we can get our occupy tiles. That will be our all entities mapped to the position, and we only care about the XY coordinates. So now we have our occupy tiles. Here we return, or we can get rid of this comment. We filter on the ones that are in range, but I also want to filter on that occupy tiles contains this specific tile is false. So I'm filtering out all the ones that are in occupied tiles, meaning that we will never return the occupied tiles as reachable tiles. So let's see if we can now pass the test. And our test still fails, and the reason is that we now need to pass in both entities. Okay, so now our test succeeds. We can actually use this one in now in our game. So let's go into our game scene, and there's a place here where we search for reachable tiles. We need to pass in the all entities, and this will be our view model dot entities. Oh. And in our view model, here we make an action. We'll get to that in a bit. Let's see what this does first. So I can now no longer move to the place where the knight is. So I can move to here. But I can still execute the movement by selecting the tile, and the reason is, well, I guess there are two reasons, but the main one is that when we make the action, we're not passing in the all entities, and that's because make does not take that into account yet. So we need another test. This test will say that make returns an empty, returns a nil for occupied tile. So if we want to move to an occupied tile, we get nil back. So again, we need an entity and another entity. We can reuse these ones. Then we have a maybe move action, that is move action.make in our example map for our entity targeting the other entity's position, and then we assert that maybe move action is nil. So let's run the test. And the test fails because action is not taking the other entities into account yet. So we do something similar to reachable tiles. We add all entities to our protocol. This now means that we also need these in our other actions. We can do something similar, but we can't provide the default. We can't do it in the default implementation because there's no default implementation for make, but at least we can just add it to the make functions where applicable. So we need to add it here as well. And then we need to make sure that we pass in all entities to our reachable tiles as well. And let's see how far we now get. So we need to add them here as well. And let's see. This one needs it as well, even though we're not using it, but to conform to the protocol. And we just use the compiler to help us solve all these issues. And now we can build and run the tests. And let's see, so our test still fails because we also need to add them here. We need to pass in the entities. Perhaps we should not provide the default value to make it very explicit that you also need always need to pass in all entities, but still I'm not sure if that's really helpful. Okay, let's see. So our test now passes. Let's build and run. Let's move. So let's move our road right next to our knight, and now we can no longer move to the knight's position because our move action .make now returns nil. So that's it for today. That's kind of a short video, but it also means we can finally wrap up movement, and starting next episode we will be working on attacking. So for instance, perhaps our knight can attack our rogue at some point in time. Thanks for watching and have a good day.